This is Podco Media Networks.
Hi, it's Mark Reed Edwards. Welcome back to Confessions of a Marketer. Rich Lyons of Capgemini is in to discuss crisis management. Usually a hypothetical, but something very real these days. We'll get to that in a moment. Hope you're staying well. We're trying to make every episode as relevant as we can for the trying days we're facing. We have adjusted the schedule for the next few episodes to bring more frequent and hopefully useful information your way to help you deal with today's world. So next time I have Mark Truss, the Chief Research Officer of Wunderman Thompson. Mark and I discuss the new anxiety index Wunderman Thompson just released. It's a very timely discussion. And soon it will be time to take a deep breath and become a mindful marketer with Lisa Norell. Lisa joins me for a fascinating and meaningful discussion. We will get back to some discussions we recorded before COVID took over our lives, and we'll have Blair Enns in to go over his win without pitching ideas. Plus, we have chats planned with Henrik Becker, Xenia Montan, Dave Woodward, Larry Ludwig, Travis Chambers, and Naira Perez. Lots more in store. Okay, on to Rich Lyons. Rich is EVP Digital Customer Experience Leader for North America at Capgemini. He's an expert on e-commerce and the customer experience, and these days, he's specializing in crisis management. In our chat, we discuss how e-commerce is positioned in the COVID world, trends he's seeing, how the current environment is pushing digital transformations and habits, and we zero in on the grocery segment. Rich is brimming with insight, so it was a great discussion. Let's get to it. Rich, it's great to have you on Confessions of a Marketer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on.
And before we start, can you give me your background and what your current role is?
Sure. So Rich Lyons, I was the founder of Lyons Consulting Group back in 2003. And then about 2.5 years ago, we sold Lyons Consulting Group to Capgemini. So now I've been fully integrated into Capgemini for the last 2.5 years. I'm the EVP of Digital Customer Experience, also the Global Commerce Leader as well, defining kind of our go-to-market. And I work a lot with our alliances.
Oh, okay, great. And what's your current focus at Capgemini?
Currently, I really do focus on kind of go-to-market for commerce and how we can really help our customers, maximize their potential online. So we look across marketing, sales, service, and commerce, and define that kind of customer experience globally. Like, how do we create the best customer experience?
Yeah. And we're here to talk about crisis management because we're in the middle of one right now, aren't we?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I understand you can't really comment on the COVID situation. Neither one of us is a doctor, as far as I know. I'm not, you're not. But from a crisis management perspective, how is e-commerce and the customer experience space positioned to help in the current climate?
Given what's happening and given the changes that are happening, and, we're talking about social distancing and other things, e-commerce is a very effective way to communicate with customers, a very effective way to help that customer if you think about it. I mean, even when I think about the last crisis that kind of impacted me back in 2008, 2009, I mean, we really saw a similar shift to e-commerce, where people were focusing on how can we help, how can we generate revenue, what's the best thing that we can do right now to help meet our customers' needs. And I think, especially in times of crisis, you need to look at what is essential, what is most needed. And unfortunately, for some small businesses, looking at how can I stay in business, and are there innovative ways and other things we can do that maybe we hadn't thought of. So with crisis, there's always opportunity, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah. So given the overall kind of COVID situation, what are some new trends you're seeing in the customer experience space, and how are they different than trends, say, from 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I wouldn't say necessarily they are new trends, but think about some things like buy online, pick up in store. Not a new concept, but gosh, not everyone embraced it, but now everyone's embracing it, right? Or wants to
Yeah.
embrace it or wants
Or
to do
has
that.
to. Yeah.
Has to, is I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because if you
Yeah.
think about, delivery can be challenging, logistics have become challenging, but if you can just offer something to a customer and have them come pick it up curbside, why not,
Mm.
right? And how can you get started and how can you really get goods, to the customer that they need. So
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of things that are different in terms of, I don't need to have my whole catalog online, but what's essential. Or maybe I come up with bundles that are essential if you think about food, that people could then come pick up. So it's interesting because you're kind of going a little bit away from traditional customer experience where we're saying, let us bundle some things together because, we're in desperate times. We're not going to maybe provide as much choice as maybe we had in the past. So very, very different thinking.
And it's kind of an interesting blending of e-commerce and brick and mortar, which used to be in opposition, right? And now, if you, for example, order something online and you go to the retailer, you're taking advantage of both the brick and mortar and the technology to order the item.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which at times they were very, very separate, as you can imagine. But, the true omni channel, multi channel experience is being kind of forced right now, if you think about it.
Yeah. It may change the way some brick and mortar retailers think about their business, that maybe we don't need such massive stores. Do you think that might happen, that more warehouse space will be part of a store layout and less floor space?
It'll be interesting to see. That's a very interesting thought because it could, like, if people get used to, if this becomes the new normal, who knows what things could look like, right? And I think you've seen certain companies really being innovative in terms of starting online and only selling online and then opening stores, which hadn't happened before, but we've seen a lot of customers going that way. And now you look at all the brick and mortars, they're being forced to go online. So you could see some permanent disruption if we think about it from that perspective, where maybe having a pickup place, like a distribution center, like you're saying, where you can pick, pack, and then someone comes pick it up curbside. Much more like, we see in restaurants, right? Quick serve restaurant, where
Mhm.
people come and you get more used to picking up because all of a sudden we're being forced to do that because it's so hard to do all these deliveries right now.
It certainly feels like it's going to be months, not weeks, until this situation is solved. Maybe a year. Who knows? Let's forget about that for the moment. But businesses will have to continue working like this. And after you develop that muscle, it may be hard to go back and do it the way you were doing it.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think it's interesting what you're saying. I mean, the planning has definitely shifted. People are looking much more day to day. They're being much more agile, much more innovative versus, thinking year to year, right? We can't in this time. Things were changing so rapidly, and every single day, new announcements were coming out, right? So, you have to be agile and you have to be very nimble to be able to respond. So your planning cycles really, really do change, and who knows what that will mean in the future.
Yeah, so that's my next question is how in this environment with this just incredibly massive market disruption, how do you plan for the future when you don't know what the conditions will be in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years? How does a company approach planning? Do they do it in shorter increments?
Absolutely. So as I was saying, I think it becomes much shorter, right? Because you're reacting, unfortunately, to what's happening and it's out of your control, right? So I think those planning horizons are much, much shorter. And I think you still have to keep an eye out for the future, what an assumed future would be that, we're assuming we'll get back to a normal, but is that going to be a new normal? So I think you keep your eye out there and still think about, okay, when we come through this, what are we going to look like? Are we going to keep some of these changes? Is there an opportunity that we're forced to do? And maybe it was on our long term planning horizon, but we've been forced to do it right now. So you still
Yeah.
keep an eye on, hey, we are going to come through this thing. We have, we all are hopeful and we all, pray that we are going to come through it. But in the interim, in the short term, gosh, we have to be very nimble and agile. And if there's things we can do day to day, week to week, then we need to have to try to do them. So you see the time frames absolutely changing.
And the same with digital transformation, right? It's something that has been a conversation piece for companies for a decade, maybe more. And it's something that they say we're doing. It's a journey, it's a marathon. Well, it just got turned into a sprint, didn't it, by this crisis that we're in. So, how are the conversations different from, say, when you were talking to clients in December and now when you talk to them in April or May of this year?
Yeah, I agree with exactly what you're saying. It's funny, people have talked about digital transformation for a long time, and some companies have kind of started on that journey. Some have started crawling, versus walking versus running, right? But from that perspective, we're looking at nowadays, like people are looking at it kind of differently. Like digital transformation can mean, how do we get online quickly? We're
Yeah.
not selling online right now, but so how can we do it quickly? How can we simplify it? Where when you think about digital transformation, we have these grand plans and it's a project that's going to take years to implement, right? Now we're like, hey, wait, I need to do this in, a couple months. Like, how fast can I move? Because it's essential right now. And we're trying to stay in business. So it's been really, really interesting, I think, from that perspective, whereas digital transformation has become very, very fast.
And I think COVID-19 is creating new habits in consumers. And so their expectations are changing at the same time. What strategies do you think have you seen that companies are employing to meet those new customer demands?
I think, we talked about some of them, when we talked about buy online, pick up in store, because that is a new demand. I think
Hmm.
everyone thought it's, people are sitting at home and they're going to wait for their package to come. But when you think about grocery and you think about food and these essentials, you have perishables. It's much harder to think through this kind of delivery paradigm, right? So I think
Right,
people are thinking differently. People are thinking about essentials and think about that now you're having limits put on quantities of things you can buy. Like
right,
when did that happen before? I mean, you
right.
you kind of wanted to sell as much as you could, so I
Maybe
think
with
that's
Beanie Babies or some toy like that
yeah, yeah.
in the
I
past,
remember
right?
that. Yeah, I remember that where people would put limits. But think about it with food, you didn't
Yeah.
often see limits being put on people. So I think, there's effective strategies going on, some interesting things to try to serve, maybe the handicapped or the elderly, right? I mean, because it's tougher for them to get into stores and all of that, so I think it's very challenging. So I do see, some strategies changing, some more creative thinking, some more innovation than we've seen before because it's being forced, so that's
Yeah.
what I think when we come through this, it will be really interesting because there is going to be this new normal and who knows what these, strategies are going to look like, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that it puts a huge demand on is just the back end inventory systems for a store, right?
Absolutely.
So if you want lettuce, or if you want toilet paper, or you want bread, and you go on, a website to find it, whether it's Walmart or it could be any number of stores, and it says there are 10 loaves of bread, and maybe you put it in your cart and you go and get it, or you say, okay, there are 10, I'm going to go buy some, and you get there and there's none there. That in an ordinary time is like, oh well, too bad. But having an accurate count seems to be, at least to me, for the consumer and for the retailer, to be a huge deal.
Absolutely. So if you think about it, there's different strategies going on, which before would have been kind of much more of a negative customer experience, right? Like think about substitutions for what you're talking about. Like you want a certain
Yeah.
type of bread, but they decide to substitute something else and you're very angry, right? Because, you wanted a certain type of bread. But now, with these current demands and this current crisis, I think people are much more open, right? Because they just want
Mm.
to get some food, to your point, versus not getting any. So there's definitely challenges in terms of inventory, definitely challenges in terms of logistics and keeping it correct, right? Because if you think about grocery stores, I mean, you have shelves and there's all this food on the shelves. What's in the back room? How do you know what you have, when people are ordering? And it
Mm.
becomes much more important given the volume that is now happening because, most of these grocers and other companies, we're more used to someone coming into the store, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
For having
obviously,
having an experience, right?
absolutely. And you assume they're going to buy more, if you think about it, because you're walking up and down the aisles and then you have things at the registers. So you're hoping for a lot of upsell and other things.
Yeah.
But now it's like you're saying, the paradigm has shifted a little bit because we're in a crisis. So from a crisis perspective, you think a little differently in terms of, hey, can we bundle together some essentials? Can we put together some certain things that we know people need right now and make it easily available?
My next question is about the customer experience for grocery stores specifically. But my thought is it's gone from being a customer experience to being more transactional. It's like, I need these products and I want them outside the store when I get there or delivered or whatever and the experience is just being able to get home,
Yeah.
right? I mean that seems to me what the equation has changed
Yeah,
significantly.
and isn't that interesting as we're discussing it? Because usually when you think about customer experience in the past, you're worried about everything going perfectly and they're having a beautiful customer experience, when they're ordering online and they're getting all their products and it's delivered, at the right time and the delivery slot that they chose and that's the customer experience. But now the customer experience is you can't find certain things. You can't get the
Yeah.
delivery slot or even the pickup slot. Like I've heard stories about, specific to groceries, where it's days and days and days before you can even get a
Yeah.
slot, and it might be a store that's very far away. But we the customers we're willing to do that because we're in a crisis, right? So I think it's definitely much more of a challenge when you think about grocery and you think about quick serve restaurant. I'll put kind of in the same thing where people are changing to think about how can we serve more people and do it more quickly, because even we have a customer who's a grocer that they can't fulfill quickly enough because of some of the rules with social distancing. So think about having to
Right.
keep 6 feet apart, within a warehouse. That's going to slow you down. You can't have that many people there because everyone has to stay apart. So even though you're getting more orders than you probably have ever seen, it's becoming
Yeah.
harder to fulfill those orders because some of the restrictions, which I think rightly so, what they were having these restrictions, but to keep people safe. But it definitely limits some of the flow. So as I said, within grocery, your question, we've seen some really interesting things in terms of, think about coming up with what's essential. So maybe you come up with a, box of fruit or a bag of fruit or a bag of vegetables or a bag
Mhm.
of red meat or a bag of fish, where you start packaging things together a little differently, to make it easier.
Mhm.
So instead of, you have to go through and pick every single thing you want and the grocer isn't ready for that and they can't get all of those SKUs online quickly, why not come up with this concept? Think about it, within retail people are used to getting boxes of goods and things sent to them and they pick what they like and pick
Right.
what they don't. So I think we're in a, the consumer is at least open to that and thinking about it. So and that gives the grocer an ability to pick things more quickly, to package things up more quickly, to stage things more quickly, because they don't have to look for as many things. Like you're going online and for $25 you're going to buy this bag of vegetables, and another $25 you're going to buy this bag of fruit. You may not be exactly sure what's in it, but it's going to have these things. Now the grocer,
Yeah.
they could pick that much more quickly than, I want a Granny Smith apple, I want an organic banana, I want, my point. So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
people are innovating, and it's funny because you would say, well, that customer experience isn't as good, right? Because you're not getting exactly what you want. But on the other side, the customer experience is great because that person couldn't get anything. So it's
Right.
really
You're getting
changing. Yeah,
something.
it's
Yeah.
really changing
Yeah.
expectations, which is interesting. I'm sure expectations will go back up, you know, but right now I think, everyone has kind of calmed their expectations down given, being in a crisis.
I think you mentioned fast casual restaurants, I guess like Applebee's and so forth. They were almost already tooled up for this because they have that curbside
Right.
pickup. They probably just needed to reassign their workforce to focus more on that. Do you think that that's going to change the nature of restaurants like that? Even after we're through the age of COVID, that we will see more fast casual restaurants with less dining space and more facility for curbside pickup or delivery?
That's an interesting question. I do think, I'll speak for myself, but I like to go out. I think people still like to go out, and I think
Hmm.
especially, during a crisis when people are kind of confined, I think people will really appreciate being able to get out of their homes, right? And be able to go to the office again and go to a restaurant and kind of have a change of scenery. But I do agree with you. I think all of a sudden we're creating a capability that didn't exist before for, some restaurants had it, but other restaurants did not. They didn't have, maybe they had carry out, but you had to call on the phone and
Sure.
place
Yep.
an order and go do carry out. But to actually, kick that up and kick production up, because that's all you can do. So now you want
Yeah.
to launch a website, and you don't have to call. You launch a website, you place your order, you schedule when you want to pick it up, and you go pick it up, and someone gives it to you at the curb. So I absolutely think, some of these industries, grocery, quick serve restaurant, I think they will be transformed. And not to say like, people weren't doing it, but I think we're increasing the capacity for sure.
Yeah. Well, Rich, it was great to have you on. Continued health. And let's talk after this is all over and maybe look back and gain some perspective on what this all will look like then.
No, that would be great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the conversation, and good health to you as well. And hopefully it'll be soon when we have that subsequent conversation.
Yeah, let's hope so. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, next time, Mark Truss on the Anxiety Index. Confessions of a Marketer is a trademark of Podco Media Networks, and this episode is copyright 2020. I'm Mark Reed Edwards. Stay healthy and see you next time.